I'll start by asking you, because I know how much you like actors, and I want you to start to talk about how actors, or thinking about actors, factors into when you're writing for the theater or writing for camera.
That's a great question. Well, my brother, the reason I moved to New York City was my brother had a couch, and he was living in the East Village, and he was an actor, and he was going to NYU Film School, and he got 6 degrees separation. I think my second day in the city, I went to go see that, and I didn't really know much about, to be honest, I didn't know much about theater. I was a jock at college. I was obsessed with fiction writing at the time. I was reading a lot of novels, and I was trying to write short stories. And my second day here, I saw 6 degrees separation, and then I hung out with him, and Gus, who was in it, Gus Rogerson, and Mari K. Nelson, who lives in Seattle now, and I was hanging out with all the actors afterwards, and I loved the play so much, and I was so surprised by what a piece of theater could do, because I thought plays were musicals. I literally thought it was like, because my brother was an Oliver like 9 times. I literally thought plays were all used to songs, and I never believed it when anyone had to sing, and I was like, that's not what I want to do. And I finally saw a play, like a real play, and I was like, oh wow, that's really, really, I mean, the way, first of all, it's one of my favorite plays, and I think one of the great American plays. But how it held the audience, how it turned the audience into a character, how the feeling of being in that audience. And I think that kind of was my first, I didn't know it at the time, but I think that was my first kind of amusement. You know, I was like bitten. And then, well, hanging out afterwards with the actors, Anthony was really into like going out to drinks with, sometimes Jerry Zaks would be there, but a lot of times it was like many of them. It was a large company, and Stockard Channing was in it at the time, and all the younger actors were in it. And I just loved that feeling, and it reminded me of like sports. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was a very serious basketball player. I played in college, I played overseas for a minute, I had a tryout with the Detroit Pistons at one point. And it just felt like what you want to feel when you like go out for drinks after a sport. And I was like, wow, this is actually cool. And then I also thought, at that point, I was like, if I write a play that's good enough, and I didn't know what I was doing, I had no idea what playwriting was. I thought I could hang out with actors and maybe get a girlfriend. And that truly was my first like, wow, it's an amazing way to come to New York, you know, like having your brother being a hugely hit. That thing ran for 2 years. It started at the Mitzi and went to the Beaumont, and he played like all the young male parts. He quit school at one point, so I was around.
Wait. Did you get a girlfriend?
No, not for a while. I didn't. I should not have ever gotten a girlfriend at that point. But I was really serious about writing. I was really serious about trying to put the hours in. And so I started buying all the plays with the stickers on it that won awards. And I was like, I tried to teach myself how to write a play, and I didn't know what I was doing. But it was that experience, honestly, of like being around actors who. I was like, in the beginning, I thought I judged actors, like before I knew what my brother was really doing. I was like, oh, they're just narcissists who want to be famous. It's so not that. And what I came to find after I started making work is actually like what I love about actors so much. My partner's an actor. You know, she's a brilliant actor, and I find that just the quest to understand like humanity and this sort of detective work about behavior is what I do anyway. Like that's what I do. I love unexplained behavior. I love hard actions that surprise us. I love what people do to each other in a room. And so acting and actors for me are sort of the hounds that go and find out all the reasons, and then they connect all the tissue and they ask all the questions. And it's like they're like psychic detectives. So I find that makes a lot of sense for me. I think early in my career, when things were starting to work well, I had this fallacy that, well, if you connect with these actors, they're just going to be your actors for the rest of your life. And what happens is they get careers and they can't do your play. or they're lucky enough or brilliant enough to have like multiple things going on, hopefully, right? That was a real lesson for me, that like my little worlds I was creating were not the only little worlds, and I had some hard knocks, like, Paul Sparks once, who I've done like 15 plays with or something like that. He was like, no, I can't do this play. And I was like, what? And I thought, I was so hurt that Paul couldn't do my play. I was just talking about this today with somebody, but like that's, like they're also the actors in my life have become like, they're my best friends. Like when I have Thanksgiving dinners, when I'm invited to places, those are the people I'm with. I love writers and directors and designers too, but like the community of actors that I've met and helped and been helped by in this New York theater community, they're kind of like a family. So it's become like chosen family kind of stuff for me. It's very, very personal.
Do you write with an actor in mind?
Yeah. I have a play called American Sligo, which was done in a really nice little small way in 2008 at Rattlesnake, when Rattlesnake was still kind of what it was. I'm not taking anything from Rattlesnake now, but the pandemic has like blighted so many small companies. But when it was sort of in its heyday, I had a slot, and I did this play called American Sligo, which had Mary Louise Burke in it, Paul Sparks, Guy Boyd, I don't know if you know Guy, Matt Stadelman, Emily McDonald, who I think is doing the play right now, and Megan Mustin Brown, and Michael Chernus. And I wrote every single part for every single person in that play. And I was lucky that I had a slot, and I had won a monetary award. I won a Lucille Lortel Award, which gave me $50,000. And I used all that money just to develop that play at Rattlesnake before they produced it. So I was able to just have like a couple of week workshop productions with these particular actors, and we just kept working on the play, and I kept working on the play, and I directed it too, so it was just me and them for weeks and weeks at a time. But I wrote those parts for them, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoy becoming fascinated by actors and then kind of trying to write toward their nervous systems, to not just like what's going to make them look, what's going to hit their assets, but also what's going to scare the shit out of them, or what's going to, bring out the most vulnerable parts of them. And that's what I do as a writer. I'm like trying to like go to the scariest place that I can, scare myself, get out of my own comfort zone. So I'm always drawn to the actors who are willing to like be that vulnerable, be that raw. And I think a lot of playwrights, I know Stephen Gerges does this as well, like he's worked with Labyrinth for so many years. Once you get into that kind of relationship with a group of actors, or what do you want to call it, a stable, a company, whatever, it kind of becomes addictive. And then the painful thing of when they become famous, which has happened to a few of my friends who were actors, then you're like, I don't get you anymore. Because you're on Boardwalk Empire, or you're Michael Shannon, or you're whatever. Like, sorry. They're like, well, you're too, then you're just like an off-Broadway playwright. Other actors you gotta find, But I love that too, and I love that now they all want to come back, now they all have kids and they want to come back to the theater. We'll see.
But I did find a clip when we spoke 4 years ago. No, it's not to the staff. It's not on our. We got the entire interview. It's somewhere in our archive. We should put that on out there. That clip, it's great because the thing we did talk about, is how animalistic and primal your intentions are with the human experience, and then you look for actors who lead with that, who live that. And you tell a story about Paul Sparks. That you knew when you cast him, you wrote for him, like in the first table read and so forth, he was sort of just paddling. And then over several weeks, it just became alive. And you made a comment. You remember this?
Yeah. I mean, he's an amazing example. Like, he's someone early in his career who could not get called back at an audition because he couldn't perform the false result of a process that didn't exist. So he would go in for Joanna Colitis, and she'd be like, I heard you're amazing, let me see what you can do. And he would just like read the text. And she was like, get out of here. And he struggled for a long time, but people started casting when they saw him and stuff. Because they were like, oh, that guy can do that can do that. And then they'd start calling me because I'd worked with them so many times. They were like, I just hired Paul for something, like, we're doing table work and I'm not seeing anything. I was like, wait, give him 10 days. And he just like stores and like absorbs, and on like day 10 or 11, his cells change and he becomes like something I've never seen before. He's done it in everything we've ever worked on, but it took me the first few things. And the first thing we worked on, I didn't direct it. It was actually directed by Mike Bradwell at the Bush Theatre in London, but I sat next to Mike the whole time and I watched it, and I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I've been involved with, and I don't think that's the only process, of course, I just think it's his process, but I've also seen actors who come in with every choice made on day one, and they're brilliant, and then they're brilliant week 3, 4, 5, and 6, and they just keep building on those choices. And then I've seen actors who know exactly what they're doing in the audition, they get the role, and it never grows. It's never better than the audition, because it feels like that original impulse was like so powerful. And I don't know what the mechanisms are for that or what works for different people, but I do know for Paul, like when people would call me, I was like, give him 10 days. Just give him 10 days. And then on day 11, something, like it's literally like day 11, he comes in, he's like a coyote. And you're like, what? And he's like, yeah, it just happened. And I think his unconscious is working out a lot. I think he's not sure, he's okay with not being sure. And then as the creator or the writer or the director, you have to also be okay with that. Carolyn Cantor is a terrific director. I don't know if anyone has worked with her here. She stopped working for a while during the pandemic. She got a master's degree in social work. She's starting to work as a director again. She's also okay with not knowing for like 10, and I'm talking about the play. Like she's okay with, and I have so much respect for that, because so much of the work that happens is in the unconscious realm, right? Where I'm writing a play right now that I'm really excited about, and there are things that come up and I'm like, I don't know why I put that sword in the corner. And then on page 36, the kid picks up the sword, and I'm like, oh, now I know why I put the sword in the corner. You know, but I do think that all art has an unconscious impulse that is, like, if you listen to it and you farm that part, and I don't know if it's meditation or some people do dream work, I'm sure you've heard of that. Like, very close people in my life, like, do a lot of dream work. It sounds really, they go to Italy and do dream work. I'm like, what's that, you know? But I do think, whatever, Stephen Gerges talked about this a lot when we used to hang out a lot, and we were both kind of up and coming writers. He would say, like, the most important thing for me to do is to be able to take a nap. So you can, like, let your unconscious connect, you know? And I think that's really underrated.
You know, the way we talk about it in classes and conversations is that's the ideal. The ideal for a creative artist is to have the time to actively daydream, to sit on it. And in Kaufman, the director who's done things here, calls it gestation. You know, trust the actors, don't freak out. The writers, the producers that get freaked out. The kind of things you're talking about. You know, this is what an actor does, you understand. You need to live with it so it can seep in naturally. And the marketplace doesn't always allow actors to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Doug Hughes on something, and he's again, I don't think this is right or wrong, but his actors come in off book day one. They're off book day one. I'm like, how do you even know why you're standing over there if you haven't even talked about it? Like what? And then he's just blocking. And look, I have all respect to him, but I just don't understand how. I think what happens in many of those cases is people get 3 weeks into the run and they're like, I have no idea why I'm standing there this window. You know, and so I believe table work should take as long as it takes. I think talking about the text and talking about the scene and character, everyone's voice is important in that moment. I think stage managers are important in those moments. That conversation is so essential. And if all thoughts aren't accounted for, I'm not starting to block it. And I learned that from a guy at Juilliard, who's a great teacher there. And why is his name escaping me in the most important moment? Where he's like a legendary teacher there. And I used to sit in on his, Richard Feldman. And I used to sit in on his rehearsals just to watch how he worked. And he would stop the actors and he would say, like, you know, connect to the thought. Like, if you're not connecting to the thought, then nothing matters. Like, it doesn't matter how you look or why are you saying this? And so that was and then I would watch his taped out rehearsal projects where they do a Chekhov play. And it was some of the best work I've ever seen. With like 19, 20, 25, 26-year-old kids doing Chekhov and playing like Fierce the Butler. You know, I saw Daniel, he was, names today, for some reason names today. I saw this actor Daniel, who was a first year, perform Fierce and one of his taped out. It was one of the best performances I have ever seen in my life. He was like a 20-year-old kid from Cleveland, playing an 80-year-old butler. You know? And I was like, wow, I was like, I just try to take those things that I believed when I see them, or the directors I had worked with early before I became a director myself, and I tried to just like create an aesthetic and like a morality about the kind, not a morality about behavior, but about like the kind of work ethic and the kind of work that goes on around the table, that goes into the taped off space, that goes into the, you know, to the real space, that goes into tech. Like just an aesthetic and a moral aesthetic about how that's achieved. And there are some amazing directors. I've worked with David Cromer. I love the way he works. I love Lila Neugebauer, who used to assist me. She should have never assisted me. She's a genius. Like, there are some people who are doing really incredible work as directors, who care about thought, who care about thought around the table before you even get on your feet. I think that's a really, like, everything gets pushed now. We only have 3.5 weeks before tech. We only get 2 weeks sometimes. I mean, at Williamstown, we have 3 weeks before our first, I think, maybe it was our first day of tech. It was like 3 weeks. So everyone's pushing you to get to the finish line. And I just think if it takes us 2.5 weeks to get everything accounted for, the blocking will take care of itself. And if you're a good director and you understand foreground, background, and tension and space, then it'll block itself, and you'll block it, and it'll be ready for an audience if they know what they're saying and why they're saying it.
And for your plays, and the kinds of worlds you create, the kind of people that you inhabit them, it's so visceral. And as I say, animalistic. I mean, you really like wolves. You mentioned coyote or race.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know what that's about, but I see it in your work.
Yeah.
Playing to the flea, that's wow, crazy.
Yeah. Wolf in the River, yeah.
So that's another place you can kind of try to figure out an election and walk into.
Yeah, I do think, well, particularly theater, I think it's a bear pit. I don't think it's a place, I mean, it's like, there's commercial theater, and there's entertainment, but I think theater, like real theater with a capital T, is a bear pit. And I think it's not a place of like, it's Howard Brentman is, it's not a place of like trifling, or just, you know, like tame arguments. I think it's like where people tear each other asunder. So that's the kind of stuff that excites me when I see Edward Bond saved, when I see a good production of Blasted, which is rare to see that. When I see I've directed some of Shepard's work, when his stuff is done well and it really feels like there's a feral intensity in it, there's nothing better, you know. But when I feel like it's when the attack on the play, I think that's how you make an audience forget where they are. You know, is like if you can make them feel like it's really happening up there, and you really, really go there. And so you're asking a lot of your actors, you're asking a lot of yourself, you're asking a lot of, like, the contract you create with your artists. Like, I used to work with the Immoralists, and there were some of those guys in that group, and women in that group, that will do anything, and I love them. And it's not equity. So we didn't have any rules. It was like the Wild West. We had a food fight in a play where there was a hole on a stage and mashed potatoes and silverware flying, and we attacked it, and nobody got hurt, not one time. I didn't even have a stage manager. I was resetting and swiping on mashed potatoes, and it was one of the most thrilling, exciting things I think that audiences that came to see this work saw. We did it at the theater in St. Mark's Place, used to be the old movie theater. I think it's called Theater 80 St. Mark's. And there's a play of mine called Ghosts in the Cottonwoods, which was the first play that I wrote and it was like a guy had to set his leg on fire in the play to cauterize a wound. We took chicken breast and shaved off matched heads, and so he really set his leg on fire. Like, we did crazy stuff. But I also have found that if you don't embrace the attack, if you're going to do some work like that, then people will get hurt, you know. And I think now, I don't know that I could do that work now. I think there's a lot of things and firewalls set up so that if you're in a rehearsal room at a not-for-profit theater, there are people who are there. So if you want to like there's a person who's like a intimacy coordinator, and then there's a person who's a trauma responder, or I don't know the names of these people. Even in our show, we had this wonderful woman who sat with us as we went through sex scenes, and that's all good. I want everyone to always feel safe. I could not have done Red Light Winter. I could not have done anything near Red Light Winter. Blackbird with any of those things to this day. So I'm really grateful that I got to do all that stuff during that time. And I crave doing it again. My new play requires a lot of intense stuff, and I really would like to direct it, and I'm almost done with it. And I don't know where I'm going to do it, but I love that kind of work. When I've seen that kind of work, it makes me like, I love to feel like I'm in an audience and I want to rush the stage. Like I forget, I want to save his life. I want to stop him from hurting her. I want to change their world. You know, like plays that call that kind of action are the kinds that I want to write. So that's what I figured out, and I just wanted to work with people who wanted to do that. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry about how you conduct a rehearsal room with that kind of work. People can tap out. And in fact, Carol and I were talking about it a month ago. She was like, we can't lose you, Carol and Cantor, we can't. You are one person who needs to stay in this business. She was like trying to make space for other people, and she felt like, she's such an amazing woman. And I was like, we need you in this business. You have to continue to make new plays. And then she said, but it's so hard to even, if plays are about conflict and tough things happen in tough plays, and people are like going at it and hurting each other's feelings and destroying each other, which is what plays are about, and you're in that rehearsal room and then suddenly someone's like, I'm feeling triggered. Like, how do you make that work? Like, how do we make that work? And that's a big question. I don't have an answer. And I know it's an important question. And I think there's good reasons to have people helping us figure that out. I think there's good reasons to sort of figure out how to continue to make work like that without it feeling false. You know, I saw a play, I won't name it, brilliant production, incredible, like one of the best things I've seen this year. And then there's a 30-second fight sequence where a man gets beat up, and it was the fakest thing I've ever seen, and it broke the contract with me. And I was done. I was like, I'm not interested anymore. It had me the whole time. So, and I worry that like when it comes to combat, like The Outsiders, I was like, we cannot be safe. We're doing it feels like a 10-minute fight sequence. It's a 3-minute fight sequence in the rain on what looks like gravel. It's not. It's this rubber material. And like these kids are, I cannot tell you how incredible they are. Like what they're doing physically, and they are attacking Rick and Jeff Cooperman, who are, they are Balanchine trained ballet dancers, and they're also third-degree black belts, and they're brothers. And they're our choreographers, and they were like, we're gonna do this, so let's do it. And they did it. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, and still one of the best things I've ever seen. Thank God it's in something that I worked on. I got to see it, but it made me proud of like trying to stand by the thing of like you can do tough stuff if it's attacked correctly and if there's transparency and everyone's communicating and the room is right and you have good leadership, you can do anything. But there's a feeling now that like, oh, I can't. That's a sex scene. I don't know how, you know, or that's a fire on this. I don't know, you know that. We have fire, we have rain, we have fights, we have people tearing each other's clothes off. I mean, it's wild. Our show is wild. There's a wildness to it, which surprised me because we were talking about before this. Like, I didn't expect to get away with all that for commercial Broadway.
This is The Outsiders, the musical on Broadway. Which I haven't seen. By the way, way. It's not being in person, but it's easy to find the film of Blackbird. You happy about me publicizing that?
Yeah, I think
That's Paul Sparks. That's the play we're talking about. You know, that plays that one. That's one of the plugs there.
Yeah, I think what do you call it, the Lincoln Center Library has filmed a bunch of stuff.
You directed a film of it, though.
And I directed a film of it too. Right. Yeah, that Paul is in, and Mike Shannon's in. Gillian Jacobs. Bunch of good actors.
Just ask another question I think I'll let everybody else. Because it's a curiosity of mine, so probably other people's, even yours. When you're writing for camera, whether it's a television show you're producing, or just for hire, you've done both. Or if you're writing for film, have you written screenplays that were not, that you weren't involved in directing or producing?
I wrote some things that never came to pass. Many things.
Yes, so, is that, do you find a discernible differences? Are they wildly different to you, or do you think they're all part of the same journey?
They are technically wildly different. Like, you can't, like a lot of my plays, not the new one, but a lot of early plays and later plays are, first act is one 47-page scene in a room, and the second act is a 47-page scene in another room. You can't even do a 6-page scene around a dinner table and expect to shoot that in one day. That was the biggest difference I had to learn, is that how do you write a 3-page scene and have a turning point and have action take within the text, like how to further a story with economy. For TV writing, for me, was the big lesson of all that. You want to write 2 to 3-page scenes. You're going to shoot 4 to 6 pages a day, and you got to know that if you have 6 people around the table, it's going to be a really tough way to shoot it, because you got to do singles and 2s and 3s and overhead a master this way. So that just takes the learning of the math of that and how to work with the crew and how long setups are. And so when I got into producing TV, I started to write with all that in mind. And that was so you're writing a lot of 2 and 3-page scenes. I know we had a sequence, you weren't involved in this scene, but it was a scene in which it was like a divorce party. And I think it was a 14-page scene. And I had to rewrite the whole thing because I had to take over the episode because we had a bunch of budget cuts and the writer's room was over and we had to change locations. So I just took over and rewrote the whole scene. It was a 14-page scene, and I was like, well, we're going to shoot the 14-page scene, and we had it built into these 3-page suites, kind of. And I kind of understood how to strategize that with the director. But doing something like that is, you'd need a whole meeting about that in TV.
What was your apprenticeship? Were you self-taught, or did someone help you with that? Because there are a lot of people here who do write their own films and television.
Yeah, my apprenticeship was I was hired as a TV writer for the L Word. It was 2004, and I took the job, and I'd never done a writer's room before, and I never thought I would. I was writing plays where people were kicking in televisions and throwing them out the windows. I really, really hated TV, politically. And that all changed when everything changed with TV, obviously when premium cable started and it's real writing, quality writing came in, and the playwrights were turning TV, and we all suddenly could make some money. But I think it wasn't until the L Word and I started to really look at scripts and really look at the mechanics. Being on set is huge. To see how hard it is to shoot a scene around a dinner table, or whenever you watch Law and Order, you see the DA sits on the desk. You notice that? He never sits in his chair behind that. He sits on. It's a better shot. And then they have the guests come in, or whoever the 8 assistant district attorney, they sit there. So they get this, and because if he's behind the desk, it's behind a big rectangle, and it's not dynamic. And so it's just all these little things you learn being in a, I worked on vinyl and worked with a lot of great directors on vinyl, and I was the producer on set for that. So I really was able to absorb a lot of stuff. There were so many office scenes in it because it's about a record company, and Bobby Cannavale is sort of the main character, and everyone was coming in and out of his office. So we had to figure out all these different ways to shoot Bobby Cannavale in an office. And he had his cocktail table over here where his bar was, and then he had another chair over here, and then his desk, and then his chair, and then there were two chairs, and we were just like, how many ways can we, but it's amazing to I think being on a set and whether you're trailing a PA, whether you're an actor, when you figure out what the mechanics of that are, I think it really does unlock what's possible to write. I do think, I still try to write the big long scene. I still try to get my aesthetic in there. I don't know if, I rewrote a lot of scripts, so I don't know in our show, and because I had to. I don't know if my aesthetic came through. I don't know. Also you're dealing with executives, and they have notes, and then so Boat Rocker Studios has notes. They're the studio, and then Amazon Freebie, which it originally was, and then it went to Amazon Prime. Their executives had notes, and they all wanted it to be more about cops, and we wanted it to be more about character. So we were fighting for the things that people said, and the things that people did, and we wanted to keep these scenes intact, and not make it about cops, or make it about procedural drama. So you're fighting that constantly. So I don't know what came through that was my voice in a TV show. But I know when I write a play, and I know when I write a novel, that it's me. And I feel there's so many other components also on. Sometimes we got lucky because we worked with some great actors.
What you said? Britain was on American Rust, that's why I just wanted
Yes, I'm sorry.
Like a cop.
Yeah, she put a cop. Yeah, she put a cop. Cop in a tough spot. Yeah. And we had great, Jeff Daniels was our lead, #1 on the call sheet, and he doesn't come in asking for changes. He comes in and he does the scene, and he memorizes the text. And if you're his scene partner, you better have that text memorized too, or he'll let you know it. He's an executive producer too, so he had the right to let you know it. But and I've been on other shows where some of the more substantial names, or the #1, 2, or 3 on the call sheet, they don't know their lines until the camera comes into their close-up. They don't learn their lines in the wide shot. They're looking at their lines in the makeup chair. And I don't like that. That's why any opportunity I had to hire a theater actor, I would. Because the training and the discipline for that, the trust of text is really important for my work. I know there are other people who, I know Succession, I know that Jesse had them saying what was written, and then he would say ad-lib two takes. And a lot of the ad-libs got in the show, many, and they're brilliant actors who are hilarious, so I'm sure a lot of those ad-libs were kind of he was fostering that, and that's fine. I love that show. But for me, I was if it was choosing between an actor in an audition who was maybe the right creature for the part, and choosing an actor who was maybe not as much the right creature for the part, but they had a theater background, and they showed me in the audition that they cared about the text, absolutely 100% I'm going with the second person. Yeah. I'm a control freak. I'll admit it. Yeah.
You can control it.
Mm-hmm.
We should see if people have things they want to ask. Shay does.
I watched American Rust, and my family and I really loved it.
Oh, cool.
And one of my close friends was a very small role. But is there going to be season 2?
Yeah, season 2 is. Did you watch season 1? She's in season 2. It's on Amazon Prime now.
It's already out?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, we're waiting to hear about it. Season 3. I don't think it's gonna happen.
All right. Well, then I got it.
We're waiting. Yeah, season 2. I think season 1 is. I'm really proud of season 1.
Yeah.
Kind of people were a little bit
Oh,
I don't know if this is good.
No, it's
But
so good.
I liked it, and I love season 2. Season 2 is
That's embarrassing. I'm gonna have to
clips a lot.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I write plays and musicals as well, and I was wondering if you found any like advantages or things you would absolutely hate in writing musicals, in addition to.
Yeah, I really, I don't like feeling like the gardener. And I think when you're the book writer of a musical, you're creating this entire world, and then you're like relegated more to the side, to the side, to the side. I had an unusual, Danya was really, because she knows me as a director and like creator of a lot of work, so she was always trying to keep me at the center of the experience. But as we got closer and closer to like the Broadway audience actually coming, I just was less needed, because it really is about the music. It really is about the movement, the lights. It's a musical, and I think that was hard for me to. I'm so used to being like the center of the experience and trying to conduct it properly, and like that's not an ego. It's probably an ego thing, but it's more of a. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can do it again.
Yeah.
I love our. Don't get me wrong. I love our musical, and I love the music in it especially. The music is beautiful. That was 10 years of my life. Yeah. And a lot of not so good years. And like the La Jolla experience was tough. I made friends that I'll have for the rest of my life. Jamestown Revival, if you don't know their work, they're a band out of Austin, Texas, and they're incredibly talented. It was their first musical. They're like these 39-year-old dudes who just like were best friends in 7th grade, and they just write really good tunes, you know. But we all were kind of in it for the first. It was my first one, and it may be my only one. But I love it. But it was tough for me, to be honest. And I don't know how much I like. I think musicals, when they work, there's nothing like it. There's absolutely nothing like it. It hits you. Like we have a moment, and I'm not trying to reference my musical because I just know this is powerful. There's a moment after somebody dies in our show, and then for 20 minutes after that, nobody says, there's not a pin that drops in the theater, and it's a musical. That's crazy. I was like, wow, we did something right. Like they're listening, like I can feel it. And then there's a lot of emotional responses after that, and then there's a lot of like warmth after that. So there's a lot of beautiful things that happen because it's music, because there's a kind of listening that happens. But it's so hard. There's so many components. The fact that we succeeded is, I can't even, to me it's a miracle. I really think it's a miracle. But I like it. So good luck.
Steve, I'm an actor and playwright, and I saw The Outsider, and I really enjoyed it. That fight scene really is like nothing you've seen. Can you share some of what goes into adaptation from a novel to a musical, and the craft or artistry?
Yeah, I weirdly also wrote young adult novels. And I read that novel as a kid, and I really loved it. And then I read it again, and I was like, you can tell. I mean, it's beautiful, but you can tell it was written by. She was 15 when she wrote it. She was 16 when it was published. So it's not like this perfectly crafted piece of structural genius. It has holes. Like there's a fire in it that's never explained. And I met Essie Hinton. When I talked to Susie, I was like, why did you write the fire? She said, I had to find a reason to get the kids back to Tulsa. And I was talking to my girlfriend in the cafeteria, and she was like, just set fire to the church. It was so amazing that there's so much incredible beauty in the book about chosen family and brotherhood and like losing and loss. There's so much grief in it. There's so much story about loss. And so when I went through it, I was just looking for all the kind of flashpoints of like behavior and like what people were doing to each other and like who was plotting what. I was trying to find all that in there. And to be honest, after that, I had to kind of create my own vernacular with it, because she didn't write a lot of dialogue. It's really in Ponyboy's, it's really in his voice. The whole thing is told as a kind of memory piece in his voice. So I kind of had carte blanche to create, like, they say things like Jesus Christmas in it. They don't say that in the book. I had to give, and I also wanted it to feel the dialogue to be as muscular as the singing would be, so that I wouldn't lose, the dialogue wouldn't lose the battle. I wanted it, you know, so I was like really in my jock mode, kind of being like, I want the text to be just as good as the music. And I was finding that I was fighting for like a vernacular for the play that is a little different than the book, honestly. And she was totally open about it. She gave me the freedom, and us the freedom, the other writers the freedom to like make it ours. You know, the Dally story is very different from the book. You know, in our version, it's played by a black man, and he, in the book and in the movie, he baits a cop into shooting him with an empty gun. We could not put that on stage in this day and age, and we tried to explore that, and I thought we did it pretty successfully, but the kind of intense trauma that came out of the audience, we could not finish the play after that. Like there's a whole section where Ponyboy has to finish the play. He has to tell us what happens in the record. It was over after that, and it was powerful, but it was over. So we had to figure out a different story for his death, which I did. I had to do that, and I had to like, with Susie's blessing. And I think it works. You know, I think it honors him, his character, as someone taking on the system. He does something different than that. It's a suicide, but it's a different kind of suicide. So there were moments where we had to give ourselves the freedom to sort of really go veer from the novel. And then we always kept coming back to the novel. Justin Levine, who he worked on the book with me, and he also worked on the songs with guys. He got a co-writing of that too, and he also was technically our dramaturg and our orchestrator. He was like the guy who would always go back to the book and be like, this is, and Donnie Timor too, this is, Cherry says this here in this scene, and this is what Johnny talks about his parents here, which was great. I wanted to throw the book like in a cornfield, just have my way with it. But they were always trying to like be like, let's not forget there's this moment, we have this if we want to use this. So it was an interesting push and pull between like making it our own and also honoring like a classic novel that people would love. Like kids are coming to this thing. We had like 400 kids at the show. Not a big group still, like 400 kids came to see our show. I've never seen anything like that. I've been trying to find a way to get young kids to the theater since I was 29 years old writing plays. And I have never seen anything like this. And I think it's the IP, I think it's the novel that kids read in junior high, high school, and they have such a personal response to it. So it was a lot of trying to figure out like what can be put on stage, what is it going to work for this audience. You know, the Dally story did shift. And then what can we do to make it as exciting as possible? Like that's why the fight exists. I wrote that fight as, you know, it's the Coopermans and Danya certainly tweaked it and found abstraction in it in beautiful ways, but that's a piece of text that's like this big in the book. And like I wrote speeches. Someone came to see the show and they were like, there's monologues in a musical. And I was like, I didn't know there wasn't monologues in that. So for me, it was a first. And so I like that John and Zach, who are from Jamestown, had never been in a musical, and I like that I hadn't, because Ponyboy and Johnny had never had the experience they had. So I feel like we kind of all were like innocents, even though I'm 99 years old. I felt innocent right now.
You do have, I'll just chime in for a second. Because such a big part of your career is writing, I think it's a big part, like writing young adult novels.
Mm-hmm.
Not your new novels. It's crossover.
It's not, yeah, it's an adult. It's an adult. What makes it sound like
But
this?
you've read something quite successful, quite awarded novels, and then the play, I don't know how much we get into it, but your play Metal Children is my favorite place of yours. It's connected to it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to get to that. But,
Yeah. I mean, the way books affect people, there's something so amazing. Like Susie talks about this. Susie Lynn talks about this. She's like, she gets letters from kids like, your book changed my life, and she's like, I didn't want to change anybody's life. I just wanted to tell this boy's story. She saw a kid in her library. She looked at him and she wondered about him. She was like, I feel like I want to write about like, what I imagined his life to be. And that's why she wrote The Outsiders. It's kind of amazing. It's like a perfect example of like pure, like watching and listening, pure empathy in some ways. And I like that that's possible, but books are powerful. I mean, Vonnegut said it, you know, he said the most remarkable things about books. He was like, they're the most dangerous things because they get at your thought deeper, more deeply than anything else, because you're constructing the world of the novel with the writer. You're imagining it, you're creating it, so it gets at your thought more deeply than anything else, and that's why they're so deep. That's why they're so dangerous. That's why, you know, countries are like have banned. That's why books get banned. You know, I can't believe The Outsiders is a book that gets banned. There's barely a curse word.
But your book got, that's what I'm talking about, your book got banned.
Yeah, my book got banned, and then I had to go defend it. I was invited to go have a conversation. What I didn't realize is I was going to be put in a Lutheran church lectern, and then 250 kids were going to stand up holding my book, shrieking. And it was going to be like a cultural debate, and then I was asked to stand up and say like why I wrote it. They were like, we're just going to have a dinner and talk about the book. And that happened. I was like, I have to write about this. This is crazy. Yeah.
I've been teaching here for 4 years, and I just want you to know I've only ever come this one time to FREEman Fridays because I teach your plays in my scene study class, and I wanted to hear you, if it's possible, if you wouldn't mind, talking with us as actors, because I try to let our students know the playwright writes in the room by themselves for months. The word, like they can change one word 7 times. That's the beginning of everything you're doing on the stage, right? So I would love to hear, you say, you use the word ego to talk about what you're doing, but I really think it isn't ego, it's much more about you are the birthplace. You just know what the story is. So I just wanted you to hear you as a playwright talk to actors about what those words mean to you and how they are like everything to us. Because getting us to trust that, it is, I find as a teacher, like I'm working to get the students to trust. They know what the story is, and our job is to justify what they've written on the page.
Yeah, word to me, it's the music. You know, to me, it's like I think of it like I know I'm a writer, and and I've written music, but I do think that text and plays especially are a kind of coded music, emotional music in some ways. I think every syllable is accounted for in my plays. I mean, I literally could read you, I don't know if I'm gonna do that. It'd be weird to read my new play off my phone. I spent 2 hours today looking at a speech. A man who's he's forgotten his life, he was in a mental institution, and he's come home with his family, and this woman is trying to encourage him to pretend he's her son's father, because he's gonna be going away in 2 weeks, and she wants to give him a gift. And he looks like her father, and the kid finds him in a cornfield. And he's been pushed out of a mental institution. It's a post-COVID world, and there's no space. So, and he found out that there are the sandwich people who've made sandwiches who are handing them out to these lost men in the cornfield is right next to the mental institution. So they go wander into the cornfield and they look for the sandwich people. And this kid thinks he finds his father, brings him home, and then he realizes that his job is to pretend that he's this kid's father for 2 weeks before the kid gets sent to this weird farm that's going to increase like a perfect population. It's kind of a slightly strange speculative fiction play. But I spent literally 3 hours today arranging the images he's trying to convey in a speech why he can't remember his life, this man. And he's also trying to justify why he can't remember things as his father. And he starts like talking about blackbirds jumping around a white paper plate, and then he talks about, I literally, it's just like, he says, I can't remember my life, and then he goes into these fragmented images, and I spent 3 hours on a speech that's this big, just trying to make the most sense, be the most vivid, like have the most rhythm, have the most instinct in it for conveying his emotion, you know, so those things are hugely considered. Like, I love language plays. I love plays. I love Carol Churchill. Naomi Wallace. Wow. Like, I love people who, you know, Edward Bond Saved has this grittiness to it. The Road by James Cartwright. He's an amazing writer. Like, you can feel that the language comes out of a place, that it comes out of a little planet. I think every place should be a little planet of language. John Ware, 6 Degrees of Separation, Marco Polo Sings a Solo, read those plays, and it's like every play is a different opera of language. And I feel like whenever I work with an actor, and I always find that maybe I'm lucky because I get to work with ones who kind of have already done a lot of work, and I'm not working with a lot of new actors, although I need kids for my new plays, so if you know any kids?
Ask Richard Freeman.
Like, I know.
From Juilliard.
Okay. Well, yeah. I have to find 4 14-year-old kids. And it's crazy what they do, but I'm excited about it. Anyway, but I feel like language is the key to everything, and so I appreciate what you say. I mean, I think the actors who consider every syllable in a rehearsal process are the ones that I feel like get closer to the truth of the characters in my plays. And I know on film sets, and I know on certain TV sets, there's an encouragement to ad-lib, and I think that's a skill, and I think it's a beautiful skill. I think for language-driven plays, the actors who consider the text and can find the truth in the text are the ones that really make it beautiful. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if
It absolutely makes sense, because I do believe that these students, right, I'm doing scene study, that they really think I just need to know my lines. But I'm listening to beautifully written work, right? I teach your plays, I teach August Wilson plays, and I say, do you hear how many times he's repeated this one word? It means something to his body, and I can barely understand the articulation of the word. Like, you need that word, he's giving it to you, it's a gift. He said it 3 times, right? So I really wanted to hear you say that, because the actors need to know, you all sit by yourselves, and something beautiful happens in a room alone, is how I imagine playwrights working.
That's how I work, yeah.
Right? And then all of a sudden, you give the baby to somebody,
Yeah.
and I want them to, I want us, you know, I want us to understand, now we are handed a baby that's a language, and it's very thrilling when they get it.
Annie Baker has this incredible, uncanny ability to do it with so few words. I mean, she's just like, it's like she's like a poet. Every line is a little piece of poetry. Sarah DeLap's Wolves. It's like, oh my God. I mean, there are so many writers out there. Brendan Jenkins, his language. Like, we all care deeply about language, and I think the plays that I get excited about are the ones that have that. Alistair McDowell. He's a British player, a very good friend of mine, who I'm supposed to Zoom with tomorrow. His plays are like, he has a play where people go into space, and in the first act they're like, people in space, and in the second act they just say the word X. And it's called X. So, like, he's all language, you know, like, and the absence of language, and you know, so I feel like those are the most, and that's what we have. We should be able to do plays on bare stages with just language. And I think that's, I remember in the 90s I would go see plays and I was like, this looks like a TV show. This looks like a set. Why? Like, I like when I go see like a bare stage and a kind of haunting happening, or like a weird like storm of language and beautiful costumes and physicality. I'll watch that all day long. I don't even have to understand it.
Because you work in various media and you write plays and screenplays and novels, do you ever find that when you start something in the gestation period, that at some point it suddenly started to morph into, you started with a novel and it's turning into a play? And if so, how do you respond to that?
I have not. But I have had a situation where I started writing a novel, and 240 pages into it, I realized the narrator wasn't a boy, it was a girl. That was weird. And I started asking my female friends questions like, what did it feel like the first time you had your first menstrual cycle? You know, I started kind of trying to figure out what it felt, but I realized like like that's what I was doing. That was the only time. And I think I did think of one thing as a book first, and then I was in my mind, I was like, no, this is a screenplay, and I abandoned the book. But once I start, I usually know. I do know that if I'm writing a play, I have to be able to see a world. Like I have to see a world that has to feel like very, very, very pungent, brutal. It would have to be like I have scenes in my new play that's set. There are little scene pieces that are in the cornfield, and I can see the corn, and I feel like that's exciting to see on stage. I can see a cornfield. But when I write a novel, it's like a voice in my head, or it's more meditative. It's more of it's more controlled. It's more like I'm gonna sit down and read and get back into it. I'm gonna have my meal and sit down, and then the voice that I'm working in kind of comes over me, and I feel it. Plays are like fits, and screenplays and TV stuff has been for money. It doesn't feel important. The other stuff feels important.
Nina, you have.
It was honestly the exact same question with like a little bit of a tweak to it, which I was just wondering, like having gone from fiction to screenplays to scripts, how you know when to filter out, like if you're writing fiction, there's a whole world you're building, but when you're writing a play, you have to filter so much of that out in the script. You can't include everything that you want to include. So how do you learn how to trust yourself with what you're writing down on the page that will get across to the actor, the director, if you just know you'll have a conversation later?
You know, I generally write way too much, especially with scenes or acts of plays. I generally write way too much dialogue and too much back and forth until I find like the actual physical or the hard, I call them hard actions that take place that create turning points or create conflict. And then I go back and I try to figure out what's essential, and I essentialize the scene. So it's like and as I've gotten older and I've gotten more in tune with my own craft, I feel like I've gotten closer to that essentialized scene sooner. But in the beginning I was writing like all kinds of crazy stuff and letting my unconscious go, and then I'd find the kernel of the scene, and then I have to go reshape it. I'm kind of doing that right now with my new play. I'm like, I have the first 65 pages are like really locked in, and then the last, I don't know, and I know where it ends, but there's a little like gassy space there that I'm not sure about. So I have to allow myself to flounder. I think I have to trust myself to flounder a bit, and then I have to like get the chisel out and like hone it, if that makes sense. More so with the theater. I think with the fiction, I can like kind of go and go and go, and then if I get lucky enough to sell it or get it published, I can work with an editor. My editor Ben George was terrific about like I lost 3 big chapters in my new novel, big chapters. Like I think it was a total of almost 200 pages, and I kind of do regret it, but he was right. It keeps the reader like locked into a pace, a reading pace. I still don't know if I made the right decision, but I think he's right.
You touched a bit on qualities that you love to see from the actor in the rehearsal room, but are there any specific qualities that you look for as a director and producer in an audition, and has self-taping like changed that landscape at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again. I think really coming in knowing your lines is, I know some people don't, and I know some people don't do that, and some people add little bits or ad lib. I really think that showing a responsible command of the scene and the language of the scene is an act of respect, first of all, and we love it. We love it. So if you're like, if there are two people who I'm like, oh, they're both really interesting, I'm always going to choose the one who had more command, even if their choices are wrong, because I trust directors too, and I trust the process. But for an audition, I think really know your lines, make a big choice. Like, make a big choice. Like, I'm not saying make a big choice like where like she has a broken jaw and she's talking with a star. So, like, make a choice about, if you wonder, like, make a choice about, like, this comes from this place or this comes from. I think that's always good for us to see too, because a lot of, especially in TV, a lot of showrunners are looking at the auditions. Like, we saw Britton's audition on a tape, and that went up the line to me, and then the director, Jim McKay, and I talked about Britton and this other woman, and we were like, Britton. And it was because her audition, was excellent. And it was really, it was like, and I was like, she has more command of the scene. So I think other directors would tell you, or other creators would tell you, it's not so important because on the day they'll get it and they'll learn it. I think it is important because it shows that you care about being prepared.
How religious are you about, you're not that kind of writer, such as other writers like Carol Church and so forth, where the punctuation, the slashes, the pause beat are so particular. And there's a situation, even when you're working in a rehearsal sound.
I try to recreate punctuation to help the actor as much as possible. But if there's an instinct and it feels like there's a rhythm that's feeling right, it's flowing differently, I'm always open to that changing or shifting. Or like, I never really write too many slashes. I write the M dashes to signify those. But like, when I get in a rehearsal process, it's all like, it's just a gymnasium for that. Like, we'll just figure it out, right? But I think whenever you see a script, you want to kind of give as many cues to the actors as possible so they can trust where the thoughts are landing. That's, for me, the punctuation is where the thoughts end and begin. And how the velocity of language, too, is important. And I think when you have command of, like you watch Mark Rylance work, he has such incredible clarity, but he has such incredible velocity within the language, and you don't lose anything. And he's talking like so fast, and I think it's because obviously he's connecting the thought. And Richard Feldman talks about that all the time too, bringing it up.
Mark, you had your hand up. You still have a question?
Yeah. So as a former athlete turned artist,
Yeah.
how do you find ways to improve your craft every single day when it's not as tangible as going outside, picking up a basketball, and shooting free throws? And was Davis based in Red District Red Light Winner, was he based on the athletes that you grew up with?
A little bit, yeah, absolutely. I really believe in the concept of 10,000, is it 5,000 hours or 10,000 hours?
10,000.
Yeah, the 10,000 hours things. However you crack it, this is crazy. I'm 56 years old, and I have become an excellent free throw shooter. I averaged 17 points a game in college. I had a 44-inch vertical jump. I could jump over everybody. I could go by anybody. I was so fast, and I couldn't hit free throws. And I was like, where am I putting my foot? And I have a court upstate now where I live. I built a little court behind my garage, so it's my meditation to get shots on. And 3 years ago, I was like, I'm gonna finally put the hours in and figure out how to become a really good free throw shooter. And I am. But it's because I never took the time to put the hours in because I was always just playing. And I was just trying to and I got fouled so much in college. I would have scored so many more points if I was like a 64% free throw shooter in college. It was bad. and I got fouled so much. I would have averaged 25 points a game. But I really feel like it's the athlete part of it for me is like get back in the chair, write the play, write the scene, stay in a gymnasium, whatever we want to call this, stay in a class. All my great actor friends, they continue to work when they're not. They find a studio, they find they continue to work on plays. They keep the muscle alive, and I feel like that's really important for me as someone who continues to try to get better at what I do. I'm just gonna keep trying. I'm gonna keep doing it, and I think what's the old saying? Genius is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, perspiration. I believe it. I do. I think like the more time you put into something, the better you get at it. And the hard thing about this industry is that there's so much no, and there's so much you didn't get it, and there's so much sorry. You know, so how do you satisfy? How do you keep the muscle going? How do you keep the muscle going? And how do you find your band of misfits to keep it going? Like that company I worked with briefly, they all went to ADA, American Academy of Dramatic Art, and they were crazy. Like they would make it. Some of their plays I didn't like and didn't understand, but they were just like, we're going to keep doing it, and they just kept making work, and they kept raising money and kept making work, and then their work got really, really good, and some of their actors are really, really good. But I just admired their tenacity. You know, it's also hard to be tenacious in a business that there's so much rejection. There was a lot of rejection for me in the beginning. There's still rejection, but I feel like finding the real love to do it, if you really, really, really love it, then the rejection is just going to be there. You know, I think that's the sport thing too, is like through an injury, I don't know, I figured out how to shoot free throws finally. I wish I would have done it before, because I would probably have had a better career.
Ben, right?
Yeah. You talked about it a bit with punctuation, but I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your experience with your vision for the characters meeting actors' choices, how it's sketched out. Do you feel like the character is before you hand it over to an actor, or the times you have to wrestle the character back and control from the actor's choices in rehearsal?
Yeah, I don't, you know, I've had an unusual time casting some of the roles. Like, this is just an anecdotal story, but Christopher Denham, who is in is in American Rust, he's in a bunch of great shows, and he's a great actor. I was meeting him for a meeting. I was at Cafe Orlin in the East Village, and I was meeting him as a favor to an agent who said, "Will you meet my friend? He grew up near you, and he is also a writer and wants to be a director." And I remember he walked in Cafe Orlin, and I was sitting here, and he walked in, and I was following him in, and before he passed the threshold of where you turn and come to this space, I had cast him in Red Light Winter. He just was the creature. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have this conversation. We had a conversation. He was so the guy. I couldn't believe who I had met. It was like he fell into my table. And then he did it. And I actually said at the end of the conversation, I was like, "Do you act?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did some acting at the University of Illinois." Dan Sullivan found him doing like a student thing in a church basement, and invited him to be in an acting class, and then he did an acting class, and then he recommended him for Master Harold and the Boys, and then he got it opposite Danny Glover on Broadway. So like, the story is not answering your question. I feel like I've always felt like if I can see the creature, not only like a creature with tics, just the silhouette, the gesture of a human being, does that feel like the person that was in my imagination? If they have skill and they can exhibit discipline and they're not insane, I'm very likely to cast them. I'm very likely to cast that person. But that also can happen in an audition room. It can happen in a cafe. It can happen because I saw them in, a friend's play. I can start wondering if they can do this kind of work. It happens many, many, many ways. But I do think that once I'm in process with them, I'm not bashful at all about saying like, he has a limp, but it's not that much. Or like maybe today, like work with a tennis racket. I love playing. I love trying to find like what makes the character come alive for an actor. And I love an actor who brings choices. And I also love an actor who does the text and who comes prepared and who shows up. So there's a weird combination. William Apps is an actor I work with a ton who is in his life a mess, and I love William, and I said there's love. And he now lives in Australia, and he's from Ada, and we did 4 plays together. And I've never worked with someone who works harder. If you drop your script, he's the first one to pick it up. He's a total gentleman. He will run through that wall. He's also an electrician, so he'll hang the lights. He'll like fix the bathroom if it's broke. He's also a great scene partner. He's also cares more than anybody about the show. And then sometimes he like wakes up in an alley and you're like, why'd you wake up in an alley? And you have to take him into your house and like bathe him and give him some food. Like he's a feral creature. He's a genius. But with William, sometimes it was just like, maybe today see what happens if like you just do the whole scene with the sandwich in your mouth. And then he'll do it and we'll go, oh, I like that part, we didn't like that part. But there's a lot of that. And then he's the one who sets the thing on fire in my show. And he figured it out and we worked on it and it was great. And then we were told by the fire department we couldn't do it anymore. But I love that kind of spirit of like, let's find something. I think within that there is discipline. Within that there is craft. And within that there is like preparation. So all that said, I love the gonzo actor, and I also love the disciplined, prepared actor. I don't know if that answers your question.
Christian, yeah, one more question about.
I saw Blackbird at Pittsburgh at City Theater Company at the end of high school.
Oh, you saw the one with Mike?
Yeah, and my friend Molly played. It was incredible. And it was the end of high school. But I'm sure.
Wait, you saw Blackbird or you saw Gompers?
It was definitely Blackbird.
The two-hander?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Oh, because this was in Pittsburgh at the City Theater? Because Mandy, you saw Mandy in it, or Molly?
Molly.
Molly. Yeah, because Mandy was in it at Pittsburgh City Theater. Molly was in Gompers.
Gompers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Gompers.
yeah.
Yes, okay, Gompers. So, when you look back at your work in the past, and then come back to it, because like looking at some of like my tapes or like now my work, there's such permanence to what you do as a player and as a writer.
Yeah.
And those lessons that you learn, how do you, does it scare you sometimes? Like sometimes I'm like, I look back and I love like great.
Yeah, I look back at some of those plays. I mean, I had an opportunity to revise a play because it had never been produced, but it was a play that was done at the O'Neill, and then it was done a few other places, like developmentally, but it was never produced. And it was my first play that I wrote, called Ghosts and Commons, and then when I had an opportunity to have it produced, I got to kind of apply new skills to it. That was an unusual experience, but like there are other plays that I might not have written that scene, or I might have ended it sooner. I might have done it with more restraint. It's interesting. I think I kind of have to like let those be. You know, even The Sound Inside, which is going to go to the West End next year, and they're doing it at the Edinburgh Festival, like right now, and I might go out and see it. Like even after Mary Louise Parker finished her run with it, there was a piece of the play that was never said for many, many reasons, and I realized I really needed the piece of that play said, and it's at the very, very end. So now that's back in. Even though it was like a play that was nominated for a Tony and she won a Tony, all that stuff, I adjusted the play. Like we can't, I know that there's been playwrights that have like gone in and overhauled plays. I know Brendan overhauled Appropriate. Like I saw the very first production of the Actors Theater Louisville, and seeing it now, it's a much different play, and I think he did to its benefit, and I think sometimes we can do that to its detriment in some ways, because you lose the kind of, something was in there that was like wild when you're young. I have a play called Animals and Plants that I reread the other day because someone wants to do it in Australia, and I was like, this play is absolutely crazy. They shouldn't do it. I was like, no, they should do it, so I'm letting them do it. But I kind of want to medal, but I shouldn't. I feel like it's like messing with your own, I don't know, DNA.
I was reading this article yesterday, I thought of that, so I'm probably going to tell you about this, because it's about Christopher Hampton, great playwright and screenwriter, adapts a lot of things, probably most well known here for his own Bruce. Very famous in Britain especially. He's got a new play, and he does a lot of things that are based on true stories and are illuminated. Well, so you do that sometimes. Other times it's pure imagination. I was asking you about that before. And they asked him at the end of this interview, where they give him source material that came from life, if he likes to embellish it. And he said, in my experience, what really happened is more interesting than what people invent. After all, most people's lives contain half a dozen completely unbelievable incidents. I think what people are interested in is what's true.
And at the same time, like everyone's like, why don't you write about your life more? And I'm like, because my life is not interesting. I'm a person who writes. I'm in rehearsals, and it's not interesting. You know, I get out of my. I go, and then I get coffee, and I go to a Subway, and I go to the rehearsal room. Then I play basketball. I go to the Equinox. And I walk my dog, and I go to bed. Like, I find that making it up from the stuff that I know is more interesting if it's my own source material. You know what I mean? Like Red Light Winter came from a real experience, but if I told the real experience, it would just be a little bit boring. I think like the way he writes, and actually the Brits are so good at just kind of like, they just know how to gut you with commonplace, common people on stage. They just know. I was reading Look Back in Anger again, and just like how devastating that play is. And it's just like these two couples and how it doesn't work. So stereophonic works so beautifully. It's because it's just like the kind of cauldron of like a relationship that doesn't work in the face of great art. You know, like how does that, it feels like you're just like looking literally in the window of, you know, this studio of these lives that are just trying to make work, and their lives just don't work while they're working. There's something about how common that is that I love.
We have to stop, unfortunately. I mean, you have something to get you tonight. If you can stick around for a few minutes afterwards, say hi, and we'll let you get out of here. But, as usual, for me at these things, I learn a lot about process and about you and about the questions from the audience. It's really great to have you. Thanks so much for coming and helping come back and do some more things with us. It's also a really good teacher. You did a class for us years ago. So maybe I'll knock on your door about that. But tonight, deeply appreciated and helpful to our community.